Welcome to another episode of the OHL podcast. While you're here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, okay? Why else would you be here? Subscribe and never miss an episode. Give us a like, leave a comment, a review, whatever it is, but hit that subscribe button right now. Okay, you did that. My name's Mike Farwell. The guy over there is Dan Mahar. The OHL podcast is your premier source for OHL information. So aren't you glad you just hit that subscribe button? Dan, I wanted to start with this because I don't want to tell too many tales out of school, but you are a season ticket holder at the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium for the Kitchener Rangers. I'm the broadcaster there, and I have a perfect view from my broadcast location of your season's seats right behind the home team's net. No, the visitor's net.
The visitor's net, yes.
That's right. I looked down on Friday night this past weekend, which was October the 31st. I did not see Dan Mahar in his seat. How do you feel, Dan? I could be going out on a very unsturdy limb here, but I'm going to try this. How do you feel about games on Halloween, Dan Mahar?
Well, actually, might have just been my incognito costume because I was there.
What?
I was there. There was a lot of people dressed up around me as empty seats, though, so it might have changed the illusion. Yeah, no, I was there, but yeah, I mean, the double whammy of Halloween and the Blue Jays being in a deciding game of the World Series was not a great thing because I know the folks immediately around me, half them vanished after the first period. So it didn't leave a whole lot of atmosphere in the rink, but I mean, I was of the opinion I'll get home to see the second half of the game anyway. I'll stick around, but yeah, it was different.
So this means you just left your wife with the kids and trick-or-treating for the night, right?
Oh, I had one of the kids with me, so that was good. The other one, yes, the other one did her trick-or-treating, but yeah, I had one with me. So
I recognize that the World Series baseball game was absolutely an aggravating factor this past weekend, but I'll tell you, like, the Rangers announced more than 5,000 fans, and it was lucky to be half that. The atmosphere really was non-existent. And then, lucky me, I got to go to Brampton on Saturday afternoon. You want to talk about an arena that doesn't have much atmosphere or many fans. But I was just thinking about it. And again, understanding that the World Series, an elimination game, absolutely had an impact on the attention or the interest of sports fans to get them to go to a junior hockey game when something else big is happening. There were only 3 games scheduled on October the 31st in the league. And I got to think that's because most of the markets understood there's no sense really in competing with Halloween. Forget the baseball game for a minute because, look, if you want to maintain the health of your league, you need to attract younger fans to the game. You want to make it a family-friendly event so parents can bring their kids to the game and get them interested, and maybe they'll take their kids sometime down the road. And I think for a lot of families, baseball notwithstanding, you eliminated the option. You forced people to make a decision between a junior hockey game at the Memorial Auditorium or walking around door to door and collecting free candy. And we all know what most of the kids are going to want to do.
yeah, and I'll give the Rangers organization credit for trying to have Halloween stuff that night, and the kids could go to the dressing room after and trick or treat. But yeah, I mean, I'm a Halloween fan. I didn't love missing it. I know, thankfully, I had my wife here to give out candy, but I mean, I would have preferred to be able to still partake in Halloween. And the thing is, it's not like it sneaks up on you. It's October 31st every year. You can see the calendar. Oh, you know what? It's a Friday or it's a Saturday this week. Let's move the games. Maybe, I don't know. Let's get creative. If it has to be the Friday, maybe that's when some of these franchises run their school day game. I don't know, but maybe do something, move them off, have them the next day. I mean, you look at Kitchener as an example, Mike, just the 2 games this weekend. So it seems like they had the ability to shift that game to the Sunday or, have it on a Thursday. Work around it is my point.
Yeah, and you nailed it when you said Halloween does on October the 31st every year, so it shouldn't be hard to program around it. I know Friday is one of the most popular nights of the week for OHL hockey, but Thursdays, a lot of teams like their Thursday games. If Halloween falls on a Thursday or a Friday, I'm sure that one night can be scheduled around so that families are not forced to make a choice, because for sure that in that Memorial Auditorium on Friday night this past weekend, there were fans who had already bought their tickets as seasons tickets and just made the decision to not go to the game. They went trick or treating instead. So teams already got their money, and the fan just doesn't get to go to the game. I heard from fans that were trying to give tickets away because they couldn't use them, and people wouldn't even take their free ticket. So I just think it's a tough position to put fans in. Respect your fan base. You want loyalty from them to come to 34 home dates every year, not including playoffs. Give them a little something in return and say, listen, we're not gonna make you come to a game when we recognize something else that is very family friendly and important to families is happening. We're not going to make you make that choice. We're going to work with you here. I found myself frustrated. Maybe it was because too it was game 6 of the World Series, and I was rather interested in that as well. But I just couldn't help but think, looking around the arena, that the Halloween factor was a factor. And I like your point about what the Rangers did do: open up the dressing room, let kids go trick or treating in there after the game, meet the players, see the room. That's nice. And our buddies over at the Odd Pod threw out a similar idea, but thought maybe you could open the arena even earlier and have trick or treating stations around the arena so fans can go around and collect candy from different stations as if they were going to houses. Because the Odd Pod fellas, the oddballs as they call themselves, made a pretty good point. Where one of them comes from, Edmonton, it's not always the nicest weather on Halloween. They actually would schedule indoor trick or treating so that they didn't have to be outside in the elements. And even around here, October the 31st is not always the nicest night. So that would be, a decent way to do that, to give the kids that feeling of trick or treating. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting grumpy in my old age. I looked at the calendar. October the 31st is on a Saturday next year. Easy. Just schedule your games in the afternoon. Let the families come to see hockey and then go out trick or treating afterwards. Don't put them in the position where they have to choose between one or the other, and maybe one of the 34 games they already paid for, they're just throwing away their tickets. Not cool from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I have a slightly different opinion because I know the teams took a lot of heat about the ball game too, saying, "Why didn't they change the time? Why didn't they do this or that?" I have a little less sympathy there because that game was scheduled much more recently. It's harder to adjust. And secondly, I mean, if you're a season ticket holder and you're a diehard fan of the Blue Jays and they're in the World Series and you really want to see that, okay, so don't go to the Ranger game that night. That's your choice. You can miss a game. It's not the end of the world. But the Halloween thing, I'm totally 100% with you, especially because it's kid-oriented, it's family-oriented. You want the kids there. Feels a little greasy that you've already collected the money for these tickets for 5,000 of them anyway. And, you're a lot of them can't attend because of the kids' schedule. But yeah, it just didn't make a ton of sense to me because, like I said, it was a Kitchener-Sudbury Wolves game, Mike, and I don't believe either of those teams played on Sunday. So could you not have shifted? It didn't seem that difficult for me to figure it out.
Some free advice for you, Ontario Hockey League. Again, October the 31st, 2026 is a Saturday. Just put the games in the afternoon. Maybe Commissioner Brian Crawford hit subscribe on our podcast when we started this week, and he's getting this free advice right to the league offices. Just don't compete with Halloween. We know when it falls. Schedule around it. Okay,
yeah, we're all kids.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly. One more thing that we can always schedule around or put on our calendars, Dan, is January the 10th. That is the OHL's trade deadline. But I got myself caught this past weekend because one of my colleagues on Press Row said, when did the OHL move its trade deadline? Or why did they move the trade deadline? Or I didn't know the trade deadline got moved. One of those things. And it took me a second. I'm like, wait, did I miss a piece of news? And then I understood what he meant. Because, of course, there were not one or two, but three rather significant trades. We've been talking trades a little bit over the last several weeks here, maybe some roster management early on, players that no longer had a place if they were overagers on rosters, whatever it happened to be. But three trades of significance in the past 7 days. Let's start with Brady Wasselin from the Niagara Ice Dogs to the London Knights in exchange for Noah Reid, a straight-up one-for-one trade. Then you've got the Owen Sound Attack and the Erie Otters doing the same thing. Michael Deck from the Attack to Erie, Wesley Royston from Erie to Owen Sound. How about a trade within the division? And then the big one, oh my goodness, the OHL Eastern Conference semifinalists last year, I think it was, right? Brantford and Oshawa hook up on a deal that brings Ben Danford and Zachary Sandu to the Brantford Bulldogs because a team that still hasn't lost in regulation needs to be a stronger team, right? And in exchange, Oshawa gets in return Aiden O'Donnell, who was a first round 14th overall pick back in 2024, Lucas Moore, Luca Diplacido, 3 seconds, 3 thirds, 2 fourths, and a tenth. So for Danford and Sandu, 3 players and 9 draft picks back to Brantford. I've put all of that into one big basket. Why don't we start with Wasslin for Reed, Dan? Your thoughts?
Yeah, okay. Well, and not to divert from that, but the first two trades you mentioned were both one for ones, which you don't see a whole lot,
You
right?
betcha.
So yeah, so the Wasselin trade, of course, a lot of people up in arms saying, well, it was just Reed. Is that all? And with all due respect to Reed, I mean, Reed's a heck of a player. I think it's a good pickup for Niagara, better than people thought. But people always get their antenna up when London acquires a player, especially a high pedigree player, do they not? And this trade reeked of me as something that was talked about earlier, maybe in the summer. We know Brady Waslam wasn't thrilled with how his year went last year. There were probably soft. I know they said they didn't request a trade, but there's probably soft suggestions that a change of scenery might be in the cards. And those tend to be the things that Dale Hunter and Mark Hunter are all over, are they not? And Rob Simpson, they tend to ferret these things out and say, this is a heck of a player we could bring into our system and really get the most out of him. And he's probably in a sell low scenario right now. So they pounce all over it. There's definitely going to be cynicism though, because people say, well, why is Niagara acting as London's farm team? The Max Crete deal happened earlier. Sam Dickinson happened earlier, and they didn't. None of these deals seem to be completely full value for the players Niagara's giving up. So I totally respect the cynicism, but I think this is one where conversations probably started back sometime in the summer, and that's why it's landing a bit early in the season.
I'm glad you mentioned Noah Reed in all of this because I think fans in St. Catharines are undervaluing what he brings to the team. And I think what you're getting here really is need for need, if you will. Reed is already NHL drafted, a third rounder to St. Louis. I'm pretty sure on that. And Wasslin in his draft year, but is the skilled slash impact player, I would argue, that the London Knights offense was lacking. We were just talking last week on this podcast about the number of games that the London Knights have had to play extra time. 7 already this season. They're going into overtime or shootouts. And it just leads you to believe that if they had that one game breaker, it would make a world of difference. I think Brady Wasslin has the opportunity to be that world of difference. The other thing about this, and to your point about whether or not Niagara is London's farm team, like the most cynical fans are saying, we have to remember the junior hockey landscape today, the competition from the NCAA, teams that might not want to part with money. And we talked about this last year in one of the Niagara London deals where you move a player away and the London Knights will pick up the freight. Thank you very much for the development and scholarship agreement for that player. Not to mention, in this particular case, Wasslin has already said, I'm committed to go to the NCAA to BU. I have a feeling he won't go there now next year because you get to London, all of a sudden you're in an NHL draft factory. So you're going to get all kinds of development. The track record is there. You're going to get a top-notch facility to play in. As much as I love the Meridian Center, clearly they're doing things really well in London. You've got almost a mini pro environment going there. And maybe Wasslin likes the water in London and says, maybe not the NCAA just yet for me. So that's a factor in this too. And listen, if you want to compete in the Ontario Hockey League today, the CHL, really, you best have a game as good as London's to attract those players.
Yeah, great points. Yeah, first on Noah Reed, kid's from down that area, so it's a bit of a homecoming for him. And like you said, he learned a lot in London in his time there, and he's a heck of a skater, can play in all situations. So it's a good pickup for them. But yeah, on the Wasslin side, I had a few people reach out to me and say, well, could this be a coup for Niagara? Because Wasslin's leaving after this year, and Noah Reed will likely be back for another year. And I said, whoa, 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 hold your horses. I'm not putting money on anything here, but if I were, I'm putting money on Brady Wasslin is not one and done in London. Like you said, all the reasons to come back to London after his NHL draft year. I would not be at all surprised if Brady Wasslin spends next year and maybe even a year after that in London. So that's a big factor as well.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Okay, before we get to the mega deal, let's slot in, even though The mega deal. I think it did go Wasslin for Reed, then the mega deal, then Deck for Royston. But let's slot in Deck for Royston here. And it's an interesting one because Owen Sound parts ways with a skilled forward who was running at about a point a game and brings in Wesley Royston, who brings a different element, a different dimension to the ice, right? He's a big, rugged guy that's going to throw his weight around. And I loved Attack GM Dale DeGray's comments in the Owen Sound Sun Times, where he's quoted as saying, "I'm a little bit uncomfortable with how much our forwards get bleeping pounded. Therefore, I wanted Wesley Royston." But a trade within the division, Dan. What do you make of Deck for Royston?
Yeah, I think you really just hit the keys on the head right there. So I know that the Owen Sound attack made noise about wanting to be a heavy, tough team to play against coming into the year. And they still can be. However, I know Pierce Bowie's taking a beating right now. The DeLille brothers, some of these skilled players that aren't the largest players are clearly being targeted by the opposition right now. So you get a big body in there that can help you live up to that identity you talked about in the preseason, help ride shotgun, throw his weight around. That made a lot of sense. And they can spare a guy like Michael Deck, who's a good player in his own right, but of the same stature as those other players I mentioned, but a little lower scoring. So they could sacrifice that. And then from the Erie end, Wesley Royston has not really ever lived up to his potential offensively in Erie. He's struggled to get the offense going there. This is his third year as a late birthday. He's still NHL draft eligible for this year coming up, but hadn't really clicked. And Erie's got plenty of size. Erie's got plenty of that type of player. What they really were starved for was scoring. So it made sense from both sides. I think Michael Deck comes in, instantly goes to the top of their charts in terms of scoring. So you can see the thinking for both sides for me on this one.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And again, to your point earlier, a couple of one for one trades that we don't see a lot of in the Ontario Hockey League. What we do see a lot of is what Oshawa and Brantford hooked up on, right? Two players going Brantford's way, three players and nine draft picks. Count them, nine, including 3 seconds going back Oshawa's way. But I'll tell you what, this is where, for me, the idea that my colleague shared, did the OHL move its trade deadline? Why did they move the trade deadline? The Brantford Bulldogs, already a wagon, get these guys for 54 games, Danford and Sandu. Why not? I suppose I'm a little bit surprised, Dan, that it's happening in late October as opposed to in and around January the 10th. If you're Oshawa, don't you usually, I think what we usually see is you wreak maximum value, or you wring maximum value out of the Sandus and the Danfords up until the trade deadline, get your team as far ahead as it can, and then move out the assets. But Roger Hunt says, nope, I've got a return I like. I'm taking it right now.
Yeah, and I had actually a couple people ask me about that too. Why are they jumping the gun now? Couldn't they have done a bidding war towards the deadline and got more? And I said, well, okay, first of all, I see it Roger Hunt's way, to be honest, because there's a couple factors at play here. One, there's a very good offer on the table. When you're evaluating your players and saying, here's what we think is the ballpark of what we can get for them, are you going to haggle over an extra third or an extra pick here or there when you've got a really solid offer on the table now? And the other factors that come into play is Ben Danford's quite possibly going to play at the World Junior Tournament. He's quite possibly leaving in mid-December, and then you don't realize any more games from him through the trade deadline. Plus, there's always, knock on wood, that risk of injury, right? So the second, like, one of your assets gets hurt or gets devalued in some way, you look at what their peak maximum value is, and you say, well, you know what? We've got pretty close to that right now. As we get close to the trade deadline, if Brantford's a total wagon and buyers fall off the market here, then Brantford could come back and say, I'm not seeing a whole lot of teams ponying up for your guys here. Maybe we're going to reduce this offer. So there's just way too many variables, way too many things that could scare you as a GM. And if I'm a GM in those shoes, I say, you know what? We've got an offer on the table now that's pretty darn close to what we expect to get. Let's pounce on it before anything jeopardizes this offer. So I get it from his standpoint.
I'm with you, Dan. And dare I say, I'm not sure a better offer even comes along. I mean, 9 draft picks in and of itself is significant. Then you add in those 3 players, one of whom, as I already mentioned, in Aidan O'Donnell, was a first rounder into this league a year ago. So I think this is, value for value. That's a ton of draft picks for Brantford to give up, but don't look now. If you check the cupboards, the Bulldogs still have more. This team is built for this year, and they've got room still to add more if they want. So let's swing it back from Brantford's side. As I said, 54 games. Your point about Danford perhaps going to the World Juniors notwithstanding, but you get these guys for a good 2/3 of the season, if not more, and it's already such a good team. I I'm starting to wonder if, I mean, it's early, but let's just throw the idea out there, Dan, that something very special might be cooking in the Telephone City this year. Still not a regulation loss for these Bulldogs. The London Knights super team of 04, 05, 59 wins. I know we're a long, long way from that, but look at the league. Look at how good this team was and how much better it just got. I mean, it's at least worth daydreaming a little bit about something very special happening with this hockey club this year, and something very special for fans in the OHL to witness.
It for sure is. And every year you get teams that start to pull away from the pack, or teams that you think are going to be wagged, but there's usually a couple of them. And it's not great for the league if there's one that's so far out in front that everyone else kind of folds the tent. So I think what you're getting now with this trade and Brantford loading up and seeing what Brantford has left in the gun to fire some more bullets and get some more assets, you're getting other teams that are making that evaluation themselves right now, saying, maybe it's not a go for it year. We can't get in an arms race with them. They're already probably a little bit better than us, so we're going to fall further behind. So maybe we're not buyers this year. So I think that's what you're seeing around the league right now, and maybe Brantford's doing that intentionally with the early buy as well, saying, "Yeah, let's narrow the competition here." I think there's a couple teams that are going to have to do something. Windsor, I'm looking at you because you have to go for it this year. A couple others that were on the fence that maybe pull out, because I think you're right with the assets remaining in Brantford and the way things went down for them in the playoffs last year. I would be shocked if they don't add a veteran forward as well, maybe with some physicality. So I think by the time all is said and done, that's going to be a really hard team to go up against. But some teams are going to have to make that evaluation, and some are not going to have a choice, like I just mentioned. So it's going to get interesting.
For what it's worth, Windsor in a shootout and the Kitchener Rangers in overtime, albeit on opening night of the season when neither team's roster was yet full, but two of those non-regulation losses for the Brantford Bulldogs so far this season. I think you nailed it, though. It's there. This is now the shot across the bow to other teams in the league that have aspirations of an OHL championship. Clearly, the team that you're going to have to compete with is that team in Brantford. And I mentioned the 04-05 Knights and their 59 wins. Again, we're so far away from that. That team also, the 04-05 Knights, holds the CHL record for 31 consecutive games without a loss. Some of their wins coming in extra time, overtime, shootout, whatever. I think they only had overtime back then. Either way, coming in extra time, which means the London Knights 31 game streak is a little bit different than the 25 straight in regulation, no overtime, that's held by three CHL teams. The 74 Sorel team, I can't even pronounce, pardon me, guys, Epiviere. Maybe Dan, your Française is better than mine. The 2019 Rouen Noranda Huskies and the 1984 Kitchener Rangers, all 25 consecutive wins in regulation, tied for the CHL record. Again, way early to talk about a team doing something like that, but one of the best, or if not the best team in the league, just got better. And just to add another element to it, that 2019 Rouen Noranda Huskies team that ran off 25 straight wins in regulation was coached by none other than Mario Puglio, who's now coaching in Oshawa. You think he's got some skin in this game, Dan?
Trying to knock off. Well, he just bolstered them, so it's
I
going to
know.
be hard for him.
He's like, come on. We may have given them some assets, but we got to make sure we stop a streak if it gets pretty long at some point this season.
Yeah, well, you know what? The Barrie Colts came awfully close. Took a 4-1 lead into the third period and just kind of, well, I don't want to say squandered it. When you're playing a team that good, it's more like Brantford wrestled it back from them. Barrie did win that one in overtime, but it was a heck of an effort to try and hand them that first loss. No junior team's invincible. It's probably coming, but they're looking awfully good, that's for sure.
They certainly are. And coming back from a 4-1 third period deficit is just indicative of how good this Brantford team is so far this season. All right, I feel like we have only just begun. Lots of trades early in this season. Some good advice for the Ontario Hockey League. October 31st falls on a Saturday next year. Schedule your games in the afternoon so families don't have to choose between free candy and your hockey game. We also have a domino that has fallen, if you will, in the ongoing NCAA CHL saga. Dan and I will get to that, plus a look at every team in this league with our weekly wraparound, which is coming up. So stay with us on the OHL podcast. Hockey is back. And this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, brings you all the speed, skill, and nonstop action you love. DraftKings Sportsbook delivers the unmatched intensity of the NHL right to your fingertips. From player props to the thrill of live in-game betting, every drop of the puck is your shot to win big. New customers, this one is for you. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get paid out $300 in bonus bets instantly. Remember, new customers, this is for you. If you need a sports betting app, the DraftKings Sportsbook is the app for you. Light the lamp all season long with DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Okay, it is time for our weekly run around the entire Ontario Hockey League. A note on every one of the 20 teams. We call it the wraparound. And Dan, you have Western Conference duty this week, so why don't you start us off in Erie?
Sure, and I feel like a precursor to this, I've got a little bit of negativity in my wraparound this week, but this is the time of year when we got to point out these things that might not be the easiest to hear. So in Erie,
so before you go any further,
yeah,
I feel your pain, brother. And I was trying. So for fan bases and for general managers and coaches listening, okay, like we get it, but you get it too. Like sometimes it's just not all sunshine and roses, right?
Exactly, and sometimes these things have to be raised.
All right.
So yeah, and not to pick on Erie, they picked up Michael Deck, as we mentioned. That's a good ad, going to help them score some more goals, which is desperately needed. But finishing the weekend with another 8-3 loss in Owen Sound, and I couldn't help but notice last year's 10th overall pick, Tyler Challenger, in his second year, was hoping he'd find it this year and really help that club out. But so far, just a goal and an assist in 18 games and a -8. That's an indicator of a struggling environment, shall we call it. But I think a turnaround from Tyler Challenger would certainly go a long way for those Erie Otters, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, they graduated some real talent there, didn't they, Dan? And then, it just, Challenger, you're right. There's a lot, though, for a draft-eligible player to have on his shoulders. So we'll see where it goes from there. For me, it's going to start on the eastern side in Barrie, and props to my partner on the other side of this podcast because, Dan, you mentioned it last week on the wraparound. Barrie picked up an overtime win over Kitchener, and that snapped a pretty ugly 6-game losing skid. Maybe it was a turnaround, you said last week. Well, the Colts have added 3 more wins since then, now with 4 dubs in a row, and maybe it's just me, but I think they like having Emil Hemming back. The first rounder to Dallas has been returned to Barrie, and he has got 7 points, 2 goals, 5 assists in just 3 games. So the Colts are cooking all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that game we talked about in Brantford. That was a war. That was a playoff-style game. It was crazy. So Barry's trying to serve notice. Hey, we're still here.
Can I mention one more thing since
Sure.
you made another mention? Hemming, the last name Hemming. So Emil is the older brother of Oscar. Dan and I talked about Oscar to a great extent on this podcast last week. I think, in fact, I'm pretty confident we're going to be getting some news about Oscar Hemming. So put a little pin in that one and remember where you heard it first. Sometime in the next several days, we should be hearing something about Oscar Hemming and the Kitchener Rangers.
Nice teaser. Yeah. Flint, I'm going to be a little more positive because their previous first round pick, Charlie Murata, starting to heat up, starting to put some points on the board, and currently away at the U17s for Team Canada in the first exhibition game, put up 4 points. And those are often, I find, launching pads for the remainder of the season in the OHL for these kids. So look out, Flint. You're going to start to see a corner turn there.
We talked at the beginning of the wraparound, it can't all be sunshine and roses. So Brampton, bear with me. I was already picking on the atmosphere. I'm not the first one to do that. That's what everybody does. Look, I ran into a couple of the Steelheads players before the game on Saturday when I was there with the Kitchener Rangers. Great kids. They're out there. given their all. I love every team in this market or in this league. But Brampton, well, we find that the struggle is indeed real for the Steelheads right now. They've lost 5 of 6, and that struggle for them is scoring goals. In the last 6 games, Brampton has just 8 goals for, including back-to-back shutout losses to Niagara and Kitchener. And in a cruel twist, both of those shutout losses were to goalies getting their first career OHL shutouts.
Yeah, tough times putting pucks in the net there.
It is.
Not as tough in Guelph. Guelph, who added Jet Luchenko back to the lineup, a co-captain with Charlie Paquette, already picking up a few points his first couple games this weekend. And those disciplined Guelph Storm, I couldn't help but notice, even just over 160 penalty minutes, lowest in the league. Corey Stillman has them playing disciplined hockey, and that's serving them well. Just a quick shout out to Carter Stevens, a hardworking first-round pick of Guelph from last year. Looked like had a bad tumble into the boards against Sarnia on Sunday. Didn't seem to know where he was. Looked like a bit of a head injury. Hoping all the best for Carter Stevens.
Next up for me is Brantford, but I'm just thinking back on our earlier conversation, Dan, about how good this team is. And maybe on the wraparound, which looks at every team in the OHL, we should put Brantford in a separate category because it's all sunshine and roses. Like they're in a league unto themselves right about now. And just when you thought the Bulldogs were going to lose their first game in regulation this season, they scored 3 goals in 3 minutes and 18 seconds of the third period to force overtime against Barrie. That's the game that Dan mentioned earlier. The Colts would go on to win in overtime, but the outburst kept the big fat 0 in the regulation loss column for Brantford, who have won 10 of 11 overall. And a note on Captain Jake O'Brien, a first rounder to Seattle. He was named the OHL's Player of the Month for October. Just let these numbers sink in. O'Brien scored 7 goals and added 19 assists. That's 26 points in just 12 games last month for the Bulldogs.
You know, we're pumping their tires a lot, Mike, so I'm going to try next week to find something negative on Brantford. I'll see if I can do it.
Good luck with that, but I like it. Let's go.
I'll try.
Screw you, Brantford. We're coming for you.
Moving to Kitchener, you already touched on what I wanted to know about them. So the tidy weekend for them, back-to-back shutouts, one for each goalie. First OHL shutouts for starter Christian Kirsch on Friday against those Sudbury Wolves, and then on Saturday, as you mentioned, in Brampton for Jason Schabel. What this probably indicates even more is the tightening up of that defensive play for those Kitchener Rangers, who, bit of an uneven first month, some good numbers in this wins-loss column, but I think we'd all agree haven't quite hit their stride yet, so this is kind of an indicator they're getting there, and they're about to get some reinforcements with Vermeulen and Campbell on the way back, potentially Oscar Hemming, as you mentioned, and Luke Elness not too far behind. So not sure they're a wagon, but another team that's entering the mix at the top of the standings.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dan, on the Kitchener Rangers and tightening up defensively. I'm not going to take away anybody's shutout in the OHL. First, second, sixth, I don't care how many you get. It's not an easy thing to do, but the Rangers have been doing a great job lately of limiting the other team's chances.
Yeah.
Next up for me is Kingston. And after he played just 21 games with the France last season and only 10 of them during the regular season, we are getting used to the name Kieran Dervin. The Vancouver Canucks third rounder is off to a torrid start with 14 points in 12 games to lead Kingston. Dervin's 6 power play points also lead the team. Kingston, though, struggling right now. So I tried, you see, just like we said at the beginning of the wraparound, right? We don't want to be negative Nelly. So I'm trying to find some positives there for the France, and Kieran Dervin is it. Maybe the power play, a reason that the France are struggling at just 15%. The France power play is third worst in the league, and they have now lost 4 in a row.
And a great segue, because my next stop is London, who destroyed Kingston in Kingston on Sunday. It looked like the France were really struggling with that high puck pressure game that London plays. But I wanted to point out that Brady Wasselin's first weekend in London, 2 assists in his first game, first goal in that game against Kingston. So starting to already fire for those London Knights. And just, I like unsung heroes, Mike. So I just wanted to point out a guy that's really grown on me, and that's the play of defensive stalwart Linus Funk, import pick for the London Knights. Does his job shift after shift without much fanfare. But if you get a chance to look at this kid, it's pretty solid and just getting better.
Next up for me is Niagara, and this ties into one of my earlier notes for the Eastern Conference on the wraparound, because it's about Ice Dogs goaltender Vladislav Yermolenko, who picked up his first career shutout on the weekend, making 30 saves in Niagara's 4-0 win over Brampton. So I mentioned the Steelheads earlier, back-to-back shutout losses. One of them was to Vermalenko and the Ice Dogs. That was the fifth straight win for the Dogs, who are one of the hottest teams in the league, despite having one of the worst power plays. Third worst in the East and fifth worst in the league is the Ice Dogs power play. Those things tend to catch up with you, but the Dogs are flying right now. They're eating.
They were till they ran into North Bay on Sunday and
Yes.
got handed. So I was thinking like their goaltending's turning around. They're keeping pucks out. Oh, here we go. But that happens on the last game of a weekend in junior hockey. So yeah. So moving on to Owen Sound. We already talked about the acquisition of Wesley Royston. I think some size and grit there at 6'4". He wants to be on NHL radar. Had when he came into this league, already had visions of being a first or second rounder to the NHL. That slipped a little with his play in Erie, looking to get back on that ladder. And then, of course, how could I stop an Owen Sound without pointing out Tristan DeLille? Current active point streak of 18 games, 27 points in those games. This kid is turning into a powerhouse and putting himself in the conversation for the league scoring title. So great streak for him.
That point on Wesley Royston is a bit of an omen for something later in this podcast. I won't say any more right now, but it sounds like you and I, Dan, are of like mind when it comes to Wesley Royston and the change of scenery with Owen Sound. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Something else you just alluded to, and that was Niagara's loss in North Bay. Believe you me, the battalion needed it too. Maybe one of the other reasons they put up a big number on the Ice Dogs on Sunday afternoon, because the battalion's loss last week to the Sioux, their third straight, was also the first loss they suffered when leading after two periods. So North Bay now one of six teams in the league who have lost a game in regulation when they were leading after two periods. It's almost money in the OHL. If you're leading after two, you generally go on to the victory. But North Bay now one of six teams to lose in regulation when they were leading going into the third period. That happened in their loss to the Sioux last week. The battalion, as we mentioned, snapped that 3-game losing skid with the big win over Niagara to close out this past weekend.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And referencing back that NHL draft a bit, my stop in Saginaw, I have to give this kid a shout out. Nikita Klepov, how can we not mention this kid? 26 points now in 16 games, just firing pucks home for the Saginaw Spirit all year. Even mix of finish and playmaking abilities. I have to see this kid ascending the ladder in that draft, Mike, and moving into that first round and maybe higher. He's just doing it consistently. And it wasn't just an early season hot streak now because we're into November and he's still firing. So Saginaw always has premier offensive talent, and they've done it again.
Boy, have they ever. Like, where's Drinkle finding these guys?
Oh, geez. And yeah, I can give Lazary some credit too with the systems because they're finding offense, which is the hardest thing to do.
That's a great point. Okay, in keeping with our theme here on the wraparound this week, where everything is not rosy everywhere, these are not your back-to-back champion Oshawa Generals. But let's hear it for Charlie Hilton, shall we? Originally a 14th rounder to Ottawa back in 2022, Hilton was on a leave from the Sioux Greyhounds for most of October. The Hounds, though, were able to orchestrate a trade to get Hilton back closer to his home in Oshawa. And in his first game with the Gens, Hilton recorded an assist. His second game with the Gens against his former team, the Ottawa 67s. But it's nice to see the kid dealing with some stuff, obviously, getting back home, maybe a little comfort, and he picks up a point in his first game with Oshawa.
He did. You know what's interesting is the timing of that trade, because his first game playing, he got to play the Sioux right away, right off the hop, and that's my next stop. And for those of you that didn't see highlights of that game, go find them and find Brady Martin's power play goal flying up the wing like he did back in his U16 year at a terrible angle. So what does he do? Between the legs, roof, short side. It was something to behold. And that same Brady Martin, 10 points in his first 4 games. So if you don't think Sioux's rolling yet, they're going to be very soon. And I would add in that same game, import pick Jake Winkelhofer, 4 points. Heck of a player on the back end. 11 points on the season, 4 of them coming in that game. So he's starting to roll as well. Look, things are looking up in the Sioux.
A team that was rolling and not so much anymore. Ottawa, which is my next stop on the wraparound. You'll remember the 67s were 6-0, and the last team in the league without a loss in regulation or extra time. So they were 6-0-0-0 across the board. But then what did Ottawa do? Go on a 5-game losing skid. They rebounded, though, with back-to-back wins, including a Friday night face-off victory over London that featured a 4-goal performance from Jasper Kuda. The Finn now has 9 goals to lead the 67s.
Nice. Yeah. And I know I promised off the top a little bit of negativity, which is why I intentionally moved Sarnia to the second last slot because my last two are a little bit on the negative side. But I just wanted to raise the prospect. Phenomenal people. I think Alan Latang's was a great hockey player, a great hockey mind. But how much longer can things go in Sarnia with Alan Latang and Dylan Seek in the GM's chair? Things just haven't worked out, and they've kind of gone through a couple cycles of players now, and things seem to spiral right now. One win in the last eight, 4-11 on the season. This team is just not flying right now. They're not putting it together, and you hate to see that with some of the high end talent they've got. So I just wonder at what point is a change going to be warranted. Not that I'm ever wanting to see anyone lose their job, but at some point things have to give.
It's tough because new ownership there as well, and when somebody's coming into the market, they want to put their stamp on things. Tough times because I'm with you. I think those guys have done a great job in the league over the years.
Yeah.
Off to Peterborough for me. First overall pick, Caden McGregor, off to play for Team Canada White at the World U17s in Halifax. He'll join first overall picks from the Q and the Dub at the tourney, and McGregor will also wear an A for Team Canada White. The rookie has 2 goals, 4 assists in 10 games with the Petes this season.
Heck of a talent.
Yes, he is.
And I'm going to end in Windsor, and I mentioned negativity. I'm not going to be super negative because Windsor's still a high end team. I've seen a few cracks in the last couple weeks that they're probably going to want to address. But news this week: so D. Carter Hicks, 2008 born Carter Hicks, committing longer term to the University of Connecticut in the NCAA. So likely play out some of his time in Windsor before heading there. But that's news on that end. And then the negativity piece was talking about these change of scenery trades, Mike, and I'm not teasing anything. I don't have any inside knowledge, but I'm starting to wonder at what point does AJ Spellacy look for a new change of scenery? Just 5 points in 13 games for a high draft pick for the Chicago Blackhawks and a team worst -5. Just hasn't really pieced it together for what's expected of him with his NHL pedigree. And I just wonder, is there a 1-for-1 or another deal out there where a change of scenery might work for that kid? But something's not quite clicking for him right now.
All right, and the last stop for me on the eastern side is Sudbury. Brace yourself, Wolves fans, and don't get too mad at me. But it's been a rough start for the Nickel City squad. Just 4 wins in 16 games, and as much as I hate to pile on, how about a weekend loss in Kitchener that extends a rather remarkable, not to mention dubious streak? With Sudbury's 3-0 loss at the Memorial Auditorium on the weekend, the Wolves have not won a regulation game in Kitchener in more than 30 years. Sudbury's last regulation win in Kitchener was on October the 22nd, 1995. Just let that sink in. And I know with the Eastern Conference crossover, all this different stuff, you don't play one another a lot, but oh my goodness, 30 years and counting since Sudbury's last win in regulation in Kitchener. They've got an overtime and a shootout win over that stretch, but that is it.
When Jason Bond Sr. is the last game-winning goal scorer, you've been a while. But you know what? Maybe they should bring the mangy wolf to Kitchener on the road with them and let it go through the rafters, and maybe that'll get them going.
I love it. And so just bear with me here. Let's take this a step further because I loved your Jason Bond Sr. reference. I had him in my sights as well. But if we think back to October of 1995, okay? Jean Chrétien is the Prime Minister of Canada. That dude's in his 90s now. Bill Clinton was the President of the United States. Alanis Morissette had the biggest selling album of the year, something called Jagged Little Pill. Toy Story was the biggest movie at the box office back in 1995. And the Barrie Colts were approved for expansion into the OHL. Sean Venedam was leading the Wolves in scoring that year, but the team would miss the playoffs. And the Peterborough Petes would win the OHL championship in that 95-96 season. They hosted the Memorial Cup and went on to lose in the final to the Granby Predators, now the Cape Breton Eagles. I thought I'd throw a little bit of that in there. That's how long it's been since those things were happening, since Sudbury won a regulation game in Kitchener.
Can I point out too that the Habs and Jays were champions of their respective leagues just a year and a half before that too, and that's now 32 years old. So it's been a while
and counting. You see, I had to put on my Blue Jays T-shirt for the pod today, Dan. If you're watching on YouTube, you probably wonder if I've been wearing this for a week in that World Series. I'm still not yet over it. Those Blue Jays, what a run against the Dodgers. And I still, honestly, my heart got broken a little bit. I saw somebody put it on X, I think better than I ever could have. Don't ever forget that sports are terrible and the bad guys always win. I loved it. But oh my gosh, it ripped a little piece of my heart out. It really did.
Well, the Florida Panthers proved that saying, did they not?
Yes, they did. They did indeed. Speaking of X, find Dan on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I'm on X at Farwell _ OHL. And we are not yet done this week on the OHL podcast, a name that's come up already. And maybe Dan and I are aligned on our thoughts about this player. Might come up in the prospects of the week, which are still to come. And that domino that has fallen. What is the domino? And might there be another? Those questions to be answered, if not at least explored, as we continue the OHL podcast. The holidays are here, and that means it's the most wonderful time of the year to save with Rakuten. Use Rakuten to stack cash back at your favorite stores on top of holiday sales. That's savings on savings. With Rakuten, you can get cash back on gifts for everyone on your list, from toys for the kids to kitchen gear for the person who loves to cook, to electronics for everyone. You can even save on something for yourself. Just shop the stores you love, and cashback is automatically added to your account. And you can choose to get paid via Interac e-transfer, PayPal, or check. Shop the stores you love. I'm talking Adidas, Sporting Life, Expedia, Levi's. How about some PetSmart as well? All of those available with Rakuten. Join for free today and get a new member bonus after minimum qualifying purchases. Just go to Rakuten.ca, download the app, or install the browser extension. That's Rakuten. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Dan, I'm not sure if this is a domino, but I can't help but think it might be. And the domino that has fallen is in the form of Dylan Gould, who played 6 games for Michigan Tech and now has returned to the WHL, traded from Swift Current to Everett. The interesting thing about that is they had orchestrated a deal last season, and then when Gould decided he was going to head to the NCAA, the terms of that deal changed. Now he's back, and the deal has been consummated. But 6 games in the NCAA, and Gould, I guess, Dan, thought that the grass wasn't greener on the other side of the hockey fence.
Yeah, and this was predictable, I would say, with the number of players that chose to go south of the border. There was some momentum, there was some bragging. Oh, I've locked in this scholarship. There was some of that going on, but just the straight numbers game told you not all these kids are going to get top end opportunities in the NCAA, and there is just an endless stream of stories of things going wrong in the NCAA for players due to injury, due to poor play, you name it, and you can be out of the lineup or down in minutes quickly. So I think it was predictable. No one expected, the Porter Martones and those types of players to struggle. But it's the second and third waves of players that went, right? And when you look at from OHL terms, we'll see. A lot of these kids will get things going and figure things out, if not this year, next year. But some of the OHLers who made the move too, not getting a ton of playing time, certainly not getting a ton of production right now. And, I expect a number of these kids are going to start asking themselves, well, I'm not terribly valued here, certainly not as valued as I was in the OHL. Maybe I should head back for a year or at least give it some thought. So I think we're going to... The Gould domino is but a domino. I'm sure there will be more.
One of the things I've been hearing an awful lot about is because when you're talking about ice time and opportunity on the ice, that's one thing. And you're right. If you're not feeling you're developing that way, the way you were in the league you left, I can certainly understand the appeal of coming back. One of the areas I've been hearing a lot about where players are getting that development that they might not be getting in the Ontario Hockey League or the Canadian Hockey League, coast to coast, is in the weight room, the training, that aspect of things that are available to the players. So let's not forget to weigh that in. But to your point, Dan, with getting there and realizing this might not be all it's cracked up to be with those second and third waves of players, it gets pretty intoxicating to talk about all of that money that's being thrown around. But as we've said on this podcast on numerous occasions, not everybody is getting hundreds of thousands of dollars to make the leap to the NCAA. So I don't know that I would stick my neck out so far as to predict which OHLer will be the first to pull this chute and try to come back to the Ontario Hockey League. But you can be sure, I would say, as you said, Dan, that Dylan Gould will not be the last player who defected from the CHL to try to get their way back into the CHL, be it the Dub, the Q, or the Ontario League.
Yeah, and there's a lot of angles you can look at here. Certainly, the bulking up our weight room, more time for off the ice for training is valuable. But let's face it, there is absolutely no substitute for ice time in competition, playing games, getting meaningful minutes. And I think the quote I sent you from Rangers forward Christian Humphreys this week, when asked about it, he said that the ice time is way more valuable to him than the money. And to me, that just put it succinctly and made a ton of sense. Yeah, like, what are you looking for at this stage and stage? Because like you said, it's not, $700,000 for every kid going down there. It can be some nominal amounts. And yeah, maybe you're there for the education, great. But what he said is true. Christian Humphreys is logging a ton of minutes in the OHL. That can't be compared to his role in the NCAA, playing every second or third game and getting a handful of minutes when you do. So I think that's a very wise and valid viewpoint, and I think he's not going to be the only one that holds it.
Just on that point, a half step further, because I'm around the Rangers and therefore Christian Humphreys an awful lot. What an absolute joy this young man has been to be around this year. And it's not to say he was a bad guy last year when he came over, but I don't know what it is about this guy's demeanor, but it's like, to your point and that quote that you just shared, he is grateful for every minute he's getting to spend in this Ontario Hockey League, within this Rangers organization, around players that he certainly enjoys being around. And it's just been great. He really is. He's different. He's matured from last season when we first met him, but he's just been a great story and a lot of fun. I think, Dan, you have successfully landed your plane. There was a sound. If you're listening and you wondered what that was, there had to be a plane landing over at Dan's place. But he safely, just like in the movie Airplane, he's not even sweating profusely, managed to bring that baby in. So we got that taken care of just in time for Prospects of the Week. And Dan, who's caught your attention this week?
Well, I had a few catch my attention, but I ultimately landed on Mr. Cole Zurowski of the Owen Sound Attack. The reason being, this kid, I've been a big fan of his game from day one. I thought it was a coup for Owen Sound to pick him up last year. 10 goals in his 15 games, 17 points, +3. The kid is a force physically as well. I think he's going to be coveted in the NHL draft because he's already delivering early in his season for Owen Sound. So, heck of a start for Cole Zurowski. He's my guy this week.
Love the pick, and wouldn't you know, I'm on the same team. But he's the newcomer to this team, and the name that's come up a few times already on the OHL podcast this week, and that is Wesley Royston. Now, I know what you're thinking. I mean, he had 3 points in 13 games with Erie. So what? As Dan, you've already alluded to, maybe a little bit underwhelming considering with the late birthday, third year in the league, more was expected, yada, yada, yada. He does pick up a point in his first game with Owen Sound. But what I think we're going to see here, so this is a little bit different than, the guy that leapt off the page to me, if you will, in the last week, but a guy that I think you're going to start hearing more buzz about, because my prediction is that with the change of scenery and the style of play under Scott Ray in Owen Sound, I think that Royston will blossom somewhat, and I have a feeling we'll be hearing more and more about him as we go through the remainder of this year and then head towards June and that NHL draft. So I think this move is really going to benefit a player like Royston. His points so far notwithstanding, this change of scenery might just change his trajectory for next June's NHL draft.
For sure. And, I think what impresses me the most is that's 2 weeks in a row you and I both had a prospect from the same team, but not the same prospect. What are the odds?
What are the odds? And you said the similar things about Wesley Royston when we were doing the wraparound and how the change of scenery might help. This kind of power forward that he was believed to be and has every potential for being in this league. So I think we were kind of aligned on that thinking as well, which only means one thing, right? We better wrap this up before we start agreeing too much.
Oh yeah, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign.
It's a terrible sign. Dan and I will be back, and we'll be at odds in 1 week's time. If I haven't reminded you yet, please subscribe to this podcast, leave a review, give us a like, drop a comment, either on the audio platform you're listening on or on our YouTube channel, which is the OHL podcast. We're on Instagram too. I did an Instagram poll. You know, Dan, if the internet says it's so, then it is so. And the internet poll on our Instagram feed, the OHL podcast, said that 62% of respondents said we should not have games on Halloween. I don't know how we argue with that result. So
Yeah, that's pretty decisive.
you can send an email, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. And hey, while you're at, tell a friend too about this podcast. We'd love to have them join our family. Dan and I will be back in 1 week's time right here on the OHL podcast.